there is like, lodges out east are really important because the weather is so crappy. And so when it's really cold out, you need to go in. Whereas out here, it's pretty nice all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't need the lodges. So I don't know. It's going to be an interesting balance.
Yeah, it will.
Hey, Brian. I think you're on mute, Brian. I don't know. I think it starts that way.
I had some technical difficulties. Luckily, we had a resident IT expert in the building. So
These young guys with technology,
I think we're all here. So if we can start, I'll call this meeting of the Minturn Fitness Center Board to order. And the first order of business is the approval of the agenda. So I'll just take a motion and a second, and then we can vote on that.
Motion to approve it?
Okay.
I'll second.
Okay. And if everybody can just say aye, that's great.
Aye.
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 And then for prior business, we'll move through this approval of minutes from the September 8th, 2020 board meeting.
I'm gonna make a motion to approve.
I'll second.
Aye.
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 Okay. All right. So we'll just get right into it. The first order of business is 4A MFC board meetings and the question of whether we want them to be public or private. And I'll just open up this discussion. Maybe John, you want to start?
Sure. Yeah, and as I expressed in the last meeting a couple weeks ago, that I guess I didn't say, but I probably could say now. It's like, yeah, I kind of understand why there was a sentiment, given the sentiments expressed in the Minturn Town Council meeting. But in general, I would say I'm not in favor of public meetings. I'm not sure it's appropriate, and it's not called for in our bylaws. So, those are my feelings. And the reason why I think it's inappropriate is that I think it's important that we feel comfortable with a free-flowing exchange of ideas and thoughts in these board meetings. And if it's public, maybe that won't happen. And that would be counterproductive as a board if that were the case. In any event, I would say if we want to have public meetings going forward, we should have a vote.
Are you saying a vote before the meeting, whether the topic we're discussing is public or?
I'm fine for this meeting, because effectively we agreed to it in the last meeting, but I'm saying on a go forward basis.
Yeah, and I anticipate we can have a vote today, whether the meetings will be public or private. And just to let anyone know, if the vote is a tie, the meetings will continue along with the bylaws as private. Is that correct, Michelle? I think we talked about this.
But the bylaws don't identify if the meetings have to be public or private.
Okay.
The only thing I would just note is precedence, and I know George doesn't like that word, sorry, is that they've been private up until now.
Right. Okay. Anyone else? George, Kirk?
Yeah, I wanted to just weigh in on this and say that when we first started filming and putting out the town council meetings, although you could attend them, but we started filming them and it made it much more public than what had been in the past. It took a little bit of getting used to, but it sure opened up a whole lot more. And I don't know that that there's anything that it would preclude. I thought the last public meeting we had after the council meeting that we had was probably the most contentious, potentially, meeting that you could ever anticipate. And we all held at a right high level and are trying to take care and support our respective groups. We do have executive sessions and council meetings for things that are not for public consumption. And I think that as a board, we could certainly approve experimental uses, if you will, or skateboard in the parking lot. Different ideas that come along could be handled at a board level with a board vote with a start and finish date, and contemplate evaluating something before it becomes formal or anything like that. But I don't think that just making it public will hamper anything. I was really impressed with the amount of attendees we had at the last one. Looks like there's 7 now on top of, I don't know who they are, on top of what we have. That's just my feel on it.
Well,
Dr. Brian?
I mean, I would offer a couple of additional thoughts. You know, I think that what's underlying this is a desire, I suspect, from Minturn for transparency of how decisions are made and what decisions are made and so forth. And I think that there's other ways to address that. I think it's incumbent upon the Minturn representatives on the board to reach out to the community to understand what the issues and demands are. And similarly, you know, after board meetings, to share with the Minturn residents what was discussed. I have no issue with that.
So essentially they're public after the fact, but
Yeah.
they're still, there's nothing, well, there's nothing secret going on, but.
Right.
Kirk or Brian, do either of you want to?
Well, I think the basis, as Michelle has said, have been private, but there are times when public meetings might be desired. Like I would say that the previous meeting, it was probably needed to open it up to public because a lot of issues were out there. So it could be a vote on whether to make a meeting public, you know, moving forward proactively.
Yeah, you know, I sit on a couple nonprofit boards, and one of them is High Five Access Media, and that is public. And I, you know, just the nature of the 501, I think in that case a C3, is that it's public. And I think my interest, you know, definitely transparency, but also that, you know, I'm well aware that, you know, there's 6 talking heads on this meeting, and we all have great ideas and we all have a lot to bring to the table. But I think that sometimes public or staff, inviting them to be privy to some of the things that are talked about can give everybody kind of a wider understanding of how things are decided and how things happen. And I can say, you know, my 5th year on council now, I've gotten quite used to the public listening in. You know, it's kind of wacky sometimes. You know, I refuse to watch the meetings. I don't, you know, I want to remember it how I remembered it. But you know, I've gotten to actually enjoy that. I think that it's nice to have the public invited to the meetings, and especially in this case with the gym, it's very important to a lot of people. So inviting them to be included, I think is, you know, we don't necessarily have to invite public comment all the time, or you know, presentations from the public, but I think that having them there can be really useful in that communication piece as well. And Brian, do you, or Michelle, did you, either of you?
Well, I think there's, like the last meeting, there's certain times when it's probably necessary and appropriate. And I think as we, go through these regularly scheduled board meetings, that as a group, as a board, we, assess the agenda, and if everything is appropriate for public consumption and, input, then we vote on that and proceed accordingly. Or if there are some things that we want to kind of talk about in more conceptual format, or, kind of just throw ideas around that are not necessarily, a path forward, but just talking points, then those are probably better suited for offline discussions or executive sessions, as George mentioned.
And I guess I would just throw out that this board has the ability to make decisions outside of a board meeting. And it's in the bylaws, it's clearly outlined, and we have found so far that we're able to do that quite functionally. We're able to have discussions outside of board meetings. So I think that the consideration of being public 4 times a year for board meetings is reasonable for the public to see, what we're doing at those quarterly meetings, with the knowledge that we are able to keep business running in the background, not on TV, but we're able to make those decisions. So I see both sides. I think having public meetings 4 times a year is pretty reasonable. And, as part of, Minturn being a public entity, we want to stay true to our values. Transparency is one of our values. I think that we can do a lot of communication behind the scenes as well for some of those discussions that aren't best suited for TV.
Okay, if nobody else has anything, I could take a motion one way or the other.
Okay, so as an idea, would it be, what if we had identified certain meetings during the year as public?
Are you thinking maybe, John, like our annual meeting for budget purposes?
Yeah.
Maybe that's a great starting point.
I'd certainly compromise with that.
Okay, and this is sort of getting ahead of a little bit in the agenda, but that would be early April. Is that what we're talking about?
I tentatively, until that's approved. Yes, right. Tentatively.
I can certainly support that.
Okay, I'll just take a motion in a second, and then we can vote on that. So 3 quarterly meetings will be public, and the annual fiscal meeting will be private.
Or the other way around. I thought you want the annual one to be public.
Oh, is that what you're saying? So the annual one will be public, and then the 3 other ones will be private.
That's what I was suggesting, but.
Okay, yeah.
Can we compromise with a 2-2, maybe? Just throwing it out there.
I'm good with that.
Okay.
So have it, have it, so I know that we're getting blurring our agenda items, but if we're going to have, well, I haven't even talked about the number of meetings we're going to have a year, but so the public ones would be early April, and most likely this time of the year, sometime in September. Is that right? Or maybe early October. So, 6 months apart.
Yeah, I make a motion to have the spring and fall meetings be in the public format, and that at those meetings, let's make an attempt to talk about the operational schedule and plans for the coming up season. So we would cover the summer activities and kind of planning for that, and also the fall to winter activities, because that's what the public is most likely interested in.
Yeah.
And the other two could be private. I'd make that motion.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
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 All right, motion passes unanimously, and that's great. So 2 meetings public, 2 private. Moving on to 4B, Midterm Fitness Center programming. And first up is a review of public open gym hours. And the way I read this is we're talking COVID right now, times of COVID, correct? And so we opened to the public with signups, with blocks that we worked out with SSCV. And so we need to review those. Currently, there's midday blocks from roughly 11 to 3 most days, and then evening blocks as well, and then weekend blocks. I think, one thing that's been on my mind since we kind of added this was trying to get an early morning block. And I think some of these things are actually tied into staffing questions and the volunteer program that we'd like to implement. So, but if anybody has anything they want to kind of pipe in about just a basic review of those open gym hours for the public.
Yeah, I can jump in. I'd like to thank the board on, improving those hours as we laid out. We've seen, we launched that on Thursday night. Michelle and I launched that on Thursday night, the 10th of September. And through today, that's 14 days that people have had an opportunity to get back in there during those open gym sessions. It's been great to see members of the community back in there. We've had, I guess, 10 unique visitors that have showed up 31 times. So the people that are showing up are utilizing the facility, which is fantastic. We've had 62 available hours over that time. So there's definitely a lot of space and a lot of reservation slots to still be had by the general public. And as we, kind of move through, you referenced some staffing challenges there with the accelerated kind of jump on things. There were some vacations and some staffing. We're trying to hire a few more people. We've been able to cover that really after that first weekend, been able to cover it with a paid staff during these open gym times, during middays and evenings and on the weekends as well. We would love to, kind of get some feedback on what other than early morning hours, which I think we'd like to add in, at the latest within the next month, but hopefully sooner than that. One of our main players, Chris, comes back into the fold in October again, and some of the other staff as well has more availability starting in October. So I've reached out to individuals that are certified and able to teach the ski conditioning class. I've played some phone tag with Amy Burvey to reinstitute the spin classes based on her availability and her schedule over there. And so those are all things I'd love to see come back online within the next 4 weeks here, as we kind of maybe set a November 1 as a goal to really open up some more timing for the public there. I think those early morning hours definitely become more feasible as we get towards November. We kind of reduce the programming on the athletic side, and that would definitely allow for more time over there. Obviously, there is a staffing concern with early morning and late evening hours. And so just in the time between now and then, we'll continue to round out the staff to add more help for those sessions. I think as it comes up later in the later here on the agenda, but the volunteer program, formalizing something that we can set up with the town, is also going to greatly help in those efforts to add more open gym time slots and more classes.
And I'm wondering if, in addition to our November 1st goals, thank you, Brian, for summarizing all of that. And I thank the SSCV for working so hard to get those shifts covered, so our public could get back in. One of the topics I'm hoping that this board within the MFC programming discussion is to have the bigger discussion of annual scheduling, because I'm learning this as I go, and we signed up for this as partners, and the student athletes need particular times for the gym at different times of the year, is what I learned from Brian when we did our training session together Thursday night at the gym. And there are times like now they call it dry land. And they need more time in the gym than they do, say, December. And the gym will open up more for the public. So I think we should start just taking a look at the public hours and the student athlete hours from an annual perspective, because it might not always be the exact same number of hours each week. But I think what we can hope for is that we get the exact same number of hours over the time span of a year.
Yeah, Michelle really starts opening up. We're hoping to be on snow by October 21st. Whenever that point is, I would say hope for October 21st, optimistic October, confident early November. But whenever that happens, our utilization or SSCV utilization in the morning pretty much is eliminated. Maybe there's a little, and there's a vast number of hours for the community.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's almost like community hours in the winter get up to the point that the restriction is on the ability to fund it and what's practical given the number of the public that want to use it. So it's a real ebb and flow, like you point out.
And normally when there isn't a pandemic, you can still be in the gym when the athletes are in there. There is, it's nice to have times when they're not in there. And I realize that some of our general public want that, but there is opportunity to be in there when there isn't a pandemic. So hopefully we won't be, I'm looking long-term. We're in this for the long haul. So, yeah.
So hopefully what we're talking about is for the next calendar year, right? When a vaccine comes out. At least to maybe the next academic year, anyhow.
Right. So yeah, just something to keep in mind from a time perspective until, like Terry said, we can share mutually again.
So Brian, when do you expect that we'll have at least an outline, rough outline of what Ski Club Vail's needs are for the MFC after on snow training starts?
We're currently working with our human performance staff to outline that, to see what it looks like this winter. So I would hope to have a rough draft next week and finalize that with discussions here within SSCV over the days following. So really we're looking mid-October at this point.
At mid-October, at that point, would you be comfortable then sharing it with George, Terry, and Michelle? Yeah,
I would love to be able to submit that for review to this team here mid-October. Again, with a goal of November 1st, early November, getting more stuff back online. That would give an opportunity for everyone to review, provide some input, some suggestions, and we could retool it as needed through the latter half of October and then launch. So it seems to me, if I heard the prior comments correctly, time will open up possibly quite significantly. The constraint will be on
hours and the man hours required to sort of staff it. So the other side of the equation is going to be, what are Minturns' priorities? What to try to. I presume it wouldn't be to backfill the entire amount of time that's available because that would become prohibitively expensive. So that would be, part of the conversation.
Sure, I agree. I agree with that. But you guys have the history with this, and I just like to say that in the beginning, if we had taken more ownership of our portion of the whole thing, we would have a better blend of what's going on right now. And we didn't. We all thought we had a perfect world going, and our membership would pay your operating costs, and you people that knew how to run the system would take care of our citizens, and it didn't really work out the best for everybody. But certainly if we'd have been involved sooner. You have a history of, and I know you're new to this somewhat, Brian, and so am I, but you have a history of an annual schedule of when the athletes will be in there and when they won't seasonally. Of some sort, you have a history. It'd be helpful to see that as you're talking about it now and looking at it forward at the point where when COVID isn't here and we can play nice together, and I'm pretty sure we can. I'd like to look at it from both viewpoints, from when you don't need it at all and when it could be blended.
Yeah.
I don't know what steps have to be taken to look at that, to make it happen. I feel like you guys probably have a fair idea and some history, and we have.
Yeah, if I understand, George, what you're saying in part is not just the history of when Ski Club has used the facility over the 12 months, but probably layering on top of that, or with that, is non-Ski Club athletes usage. Do we have that data, Brian? Do you know?
Non-ski club athlete usage, is that the question?
Yeah, over the 12 months.
The mind body system, I'm sure, captures a large chunk of that.
I mean, what would be useful to get a hold of, or just to assess, is where's the demand? Is it, early mornings, and what's early morning mean? Is that starting at 6:30 or is that starting at 8? And how much is in the evening? How much is during the day? And to the degree which we can start to clarify where, from Minturns' perspective, where, in the past, where's their demand been? Not to say that where it has to be in the future, but it's a starting point. And similarly, where ski clubs hours of usage have been, what are they, and how could those dovetail? And I think, the final layer is looking at sort of COVID and then post-COVID, because post-COVID, as I think it was George saying, that the likelihood is that we could co-mingle some of these audiences.
Yeah, I think you captured that real well. How do we do that?
Do you think you have the data, Brian, to at least take a crack at it? It doesn't have to be perfect, but directionally.
Yeah, I think we can over the next probably 2 weeks here, digging into the historical data to kind of determine some of those peak usage times, and then I think in general terms, really kind of the ebb and flow of a 12-month schedule of where the opportunities are.
Yeah, and the other thing that I think that, I'm not sure whether it's right away or in several weeks, but to survey our members to get a better handle on where the demand is for hours.
I agree wholeheartedly. I was working on a survey idea of a little card that could be filled out at each usage, which would highlight, I suppose, equipment, attitude, cleanliness, and availability hours, or 4 or 5 little items that would just be real quick and just give us a feel for the perception and how it was going.
Yeah.
I could certainly,
Or maybe a survey monkey.
generate some kind of a survey that we could circulate and modify that would be pretty simple, I think.
Yeah.
You know, I want to throw out, I'm jumping ahead, but in jumping ahead, it totally is relevant to what we're discussing. Like when you look at the operating budget, we're facing $113,000 loss, operating loss this year. Staffing's significant, that's over $30,000, but also for this year, it's cleaning, $33,000. That's because for COVID, it's $1,050 per week to clean the facility every day. So we have to, the topic of volunteerism, which Terry and Michelle have both brought up, and I looked through the entire video of the town meeting, and that came up during the town meeting. I think that's a major issue, and the survey is really important to see when it needs to be open to serve the public. And I want to throw out another issue to look at for the next board meeting is fees. And I know fees increased. I've been looking into fees, and I would argue that the fees are possibly too high and that we could have greater utilization and arguably more revenue if we significantly lowered fees. So I looked at fees of Minturn compared to Gibson. And Gibson offers more in amenities, but it's more to the west. And Gibson's fees are significantly lower. So maybe there'd be higher utilization by the community if we look at fees and we lower fees, and you might actually have more revenue, and that might inspire more people to get involved on a volunteer basis to cut the operating costs. So I know I'm jumping ahead a little bit. I think it all links together.
Kirk, I think you're correct, and I support taking a look at the fees, and maybe let's get more people in there and see how that turns things around, and how the volunteer opportunities can help offset some of those costs that we're seeing. Because and again, I know we're jumping ahead, but when we get to it, to the financials, I agree, this current model is very difficult to sustain over the long term.
Yeah, I agree with that too. I think it was the gym traditionally was run by JC, and I think he did a great job. And but I think that the public needs have to be addressed, and we've been tossing around ideas, and it is hard to talk about programming without the staffing. And I know that I know that your current staff is spread thin with just the athletes. So I think there's a lot of discussion to be had about moving forward with, like you said, Kirk, volunteer base that we can tap into. But also, I'm interested in how the MFC is run as a business as a whole. Generally a business would figure out all of its operating costs, staffing, maintenance, and anything you can think of. The building needs to be stained every 5 years, things like that. And then from that, you would figure out what the cost of a membership is to cover those costs. So I think we really need to have those deep discussions of how much does this gym cost to run, and what's going to, what's it going to take. So those, just to kind of, and I think we can get into this with the, further down the agenda, but I think that for right now, if we can just concentrate on the hours with what's in our ability right now. I know that we haven't had a lot of, as Brian said, people utilizing the fees. And I think that that'll change. For some reason, I think that'll change when Chris gets back. I think she'll be able to talk with members, maybe blast out more communication to members about the drop-in fee, and people having, I know that there's one person is in there 5 days a week, and so he's spending $50 a week right now. So there's opportunity to revisit that. And then I think also the winter conditioning class, if the current staff of Maddie and Miles have time to put that one back on, usually I think it starts in October. There's a lot of people that take that class, and I think that if we can figure out a way to, and that's the item 4B3 on the agenda, but if we can figure out a way to bring that in, I would like to hear it.
Thank you, Terry. I have been talking with an instructor. Maddie and Miles are pretty well spread thin right now, but we do have someone else that is a full-time employee. She was an intern down there at the MFC, so she's a familiar face. She understands the operation, and actually has worked with the software in a previous role for someone else prior. But she is on board to start leading the ski conditioning classes. She's out of town right now on a previously scheduled vacation, and the goal is when she returns to sit down upon Chris's return as well, and map out those times. And really, Chris is being kind of the conduit of information here, since she's been there and really understands the operation and understands the clientele and the needs of all parties involved. She's really a crucial part as we move forward here, and she's got some well-deserved time off right now, but when she returns, we'll be digging into that.
Would you have a starting date for, do you have a rough idea of when that winter conditioning class will start?
I do not. I would like to get it going in October. As you said, historically, that's when it starts. I think that is feasible. I think along with kind of the reinstitution of open gym hours over the past 2 weeks, I think we're seeing that, we need a marketing effort behind this as well. Just sending out a couple of emails that we're back open and there's hours and you need to sign up is not moving the needle. And I don't know if it's getting the message out there as broadly as we need. But when we do launch a course like ski conditioning, knowing that is well attended and a lot of people are looking for that type of content at this time of year, I think promoting that'll be key to the success again.
Yeah, and I think at the very least, we both have within our power the resources to kind of we have a newsletter in Minturn, and I think you guys probably have a way to communicate with all your members of SSCV, and if we can get the word out there. I've definitely had parents asking me if they can sign up for the gym, so that communication piece is big. And moving forward, I think there's a lot of work to be done on the marketing. I think it's definitely fallen off in the past few years, but I think we can, we have a lot of work to do in that direction. Okay, so anything else on MFC programming?
One thing that's come up, we've been fielding the questions, for the past 2 weeks now is when can we start to allow staff back in, just like the level 1 memberships that certain members of the town of Minturn get free of charge. There's also been the same thing for certain staff, both at SSCV and VSSA, knowing that these open gym times have not been well attended and there is still spaces available. I wanted to kind of put that out there for consideration. Now, I do feel that a reservation system is necessary, regardless of what type of member you are. We do need to manage headcount and make sure that we are doing the best for our community and the health and safety of everyone who is around that facility. That being said, I wonder what that balance is of being able to allow some staff in there to work out when there is availability, while still making sure we have enough spots available for our residents of Minturn as well.
Brian, I actually would fall under that category, actually, because Minter and town council members do get membership with their being on council. But since the gym opened, I've just been signing up, doing the $10 drop-ins. And so, yeah, I would be curious if anybody else has some feedback on that. And I certainly don't want, getting the membership included with council. I don't want to take the place of anybody that's a paying member. But this whole thing for Minturn came about, I think, probably at the same time it came about for your staff, where I was a paying member for 5 years and then it switched. So I wasn't even aware of that. So yeah, if anybody else has feedback on that, I would love to hear it. Do you know how many spots? Is there 15 spots per block?
Yeah, so each 2-hour block we've laid out with 15 spots. As you've experienced, there's some back-to-back blocks and some individuals that signed up for both sessions, and whether they're there for 4 hours or not, doesn't matter. But I do want to make sure, as you said, that somehow we can. I've got this question to Chris and also the MindBody team for the software, but is there a way we can earmark a certain number, percentage of spots for the level 1 free memberships? Is that 3 spots per open gym, leaving 12 spots for the general public? That's really kind of been bouncing around, and I'm trying to figure out what is best. So looking for some ideas and support on a way forward with welcoming some staff back in there to work out.
Kirk, you're muted.
Sorry, we haven't been close to filling any sessions, so I don't see why we need to get so technical. It's like if the fire department wants to go in and work out, they should go work out, or our staff, I think should be part of the public. And if we hit a point where we're starting to fill, and there's not the time, you've only had 2 people in there. Often there's only been 2 people, not 15, right?
Yeah, no, I mean, our biggest 4 is the biggest at any one time, or at least according to MindBody, 4 is the biggest number we've had.
Brian, do you have a feel for when your staff would want to be in there? I mean, I think that's important. Obviously, your coaches and your staffing need to, stay in top shape too. And I have no problem with it either. I think that the gym it's kind of fun having the gym to yourself. I mean, but I'm used to that. It's been like that, but over the years it's been like that. But there's definitely certain times that are busier than others. And but yeah, we're not even getting close to the 15.
Yeah.
And I think the look of the gym too. I mean, when people drive by it, if there's people working out, I mean, I think it looks kind of closed right now. So if you have parents driving by and they see people in there, I think it looks better for the gym overall.
Yeah, I think to answer your question, Terry, I think generally the staff that we're envisioning, if it's VSSA, that would be kind of the evening sessions. If it's SSCV staff, some may be able to do a midday session, kind of more towards the afternoon, maybe that 1 to 3 time block, but generally it's probably evenings as well. I wouldn't see a ton of use when we do launch the morning sessions, just knowing the schedules that the school staff and the SSCV staff have. I think those morning sessions would really be Minturn centric, if you will.
Yeah, I think that, right now, I think that all members are kind of doing the $10 drop-in fee until Chris gets back and can kind of work out the MindBody online app that she uses there. And so, I don't know, how to, I mean, would you guys be able to, when is she coming back? I mean, would you be able to figure out the sign up without her? I would definitely want them to sign up on the same app as the general.
Yeah, I agree. And we've been communicating. Chris has been great, even though she's out of town. She's been very, very responsive. So we'll continue that conversation. She's able to do a little bit of work from afar, and she is going to be back at the end of this month, which is really just a few days away at this point.
Okay. I just want to keep us moving. Does anybody else have any questions on the fitness center programming right now?
I just think to draw, put a bow on it, as it relates to, staff and so forth, it seems to me rather than putting restrictions on it now, I'd say let's just keep tabs on what the demand is. And if the demand, is getting close to getting capacity at any of those time slots, then revisit the question as to whether we put any constraints on it.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I mean, this is COVID, and it's like this across every aspect of life right now. We just have to kind of, and I think, this board as it stands right now has been very good on communication. So I would be fine with just having the lines of communication open.
So there's some public here today listening in, and you guys have email chains and we have newsletters and you guys do. Let's just say, sign up, you guys. Just spread the word that the ones that are listening, sign up and let's utilize this. And again, we'll revisit this if we're getting so many people that we need to. It's a shame for it to sit there and not be used. Let's be more aggressive than timid in terms of signing up, and we can sort out 4 of us and 10 of you, or 10 of you and 4 of us. We could sort that out if and when the need arises. But
yeah,
we're kind of, I don't think the water is as treacherous as we're approaching it as, but the cleaning piece is a huge piece. That's all I have on the programming of it. I'd like to hear about the, I guess that's next on your list, Jerry, about administration of the volunteer program and how we're look from that side as far as blending volunteer workers with the paid staff. Go ahead, Madam President, sorry.
I will jump in on that one, George, because I've been pushing for that. And I think that that's something that I'm hoping Brian and I can take a look at regarding, I expect it to be a volunteer program from Minturn folks that are mostly wanting to get in and use the gym, but there's not the ability to staff it at all of the times that might be needed. And I think when we get to that line item on the budget, we're going to have to start finding creative ways to staff in a responsible manner. So I would look at putting a program together with policies and liabilities and waivers and all of the things that come with a full volunteer program in order to keep the facility open and available to the public, but at, like we were saying earlier, a reasonable cost to the facility. So that's something I'm hoping that we might be able to start connecting on behind the scenes to get something that we can bring to the board for review and consideration.
Yeah, I'm happy to jump on tackling that with you, Michelle, and we can figure out a time offline and connect that way.
That'd be great. And I think in addition to that, we'll need to take a look at, I'm sure Minturn will need to take a look at some, insurance requirements to cover volunteers, those types of things. So I think that it'll be a little more in depth than originally anticipated, but in the way that make sure everything is covered for the facility. So thank you.
Michelle, did you want to keep that just to Minturn residents, or is there opportunity for SSCV community to volunteer as well?
I think that we're going to be very open. I think it's probably going to be something where we'll need volunteers at all sorts of times when different folks might be available to help out. So I don't think anything is off the table right now. I think we'll take a look, see what level of interest is out there. Again, Brian and I will both need to utilize all the sources of communication to get the word out once we have something approved by the board and in place, to see who might be wanting to take advantage of something like this. And again, board will need to approve. Is it, help offset membership costs? Is it strictly a volunteer program and you're just doing it out of the good of your heart? That doesn't always get you super far, but you never know. So I think for now, all options are open until we find out something's not working.
I really think the more we can move to totally eliminate the us versus them kind of perception, and we'll own that part of that was on SSCV, not intentionally, but it was out there. So I think the more we open it up to everyone working together and the public, and I'm going to be a strong advocate for lowering fees. I think I don't think it's linear. So I've seen situations, frankly, where we owned a small ski area at a school I was at, and we significantly reduced the season's passes, and we more than doubled the revenue. So I think getting more people in there and people feeling good about their involvement and feeling that it's fair, I think you start getting more volunteerism. And everyone can say why it won't work, but I say, why can't it work? So I think we need to work together, and it fits into everyone feeling good about this and feeling the equal share.
Kirk, that was a fair high five.
Thanks.
All right. Yes, I'm thrilled about it. Okay. So we're due 4D, Midterm Fitness Center equipment needs for public and student athletes. I will just say that, I'm really, my interest here is moving forward, and I went into the gym, and Miles Gentry gave me we went through the gym and did an inventory of the gym and all the equipment, and he, kind of explained there's equipment in there that is owned by SSCV that they brought in, and there's equipment in there that the fitness center has purchased, and there's definitely has been a lot of marrying of the two. I think for the midterm public, our immediate, question, based on council meetings, is the loss of the ellipticals and the selling of the ellipticals, and, where we can go with that moving forward. I think those ellipticals were definitely a key piece of equipment used by the midterm public, or the general public. But I think we can have a greater question too about the equipment in there. Miles identified equipment that no one uses that could be sold off. So I think we can all have a pretty robust conversation here, but maybe I'll just give this one to Brian.
Yeah, Terry, thank you. You and I had a brief conversation previously about this, and I think I'll share with the rest of the board and those watching here that, at the time when the decision was made to offload some of that equipment in order to gain some more space in there and be able to spread people out, I did not have a clear understanding about the level of need for those pieces of equipment or their usage, if you will. And so for that, I apologize. And obviously that I think we've all learned a lot over the past month or so here. I certainly have. I think looking at a like like style or like type of piece of equipment is what I have been doing. I did look at some ellipticals. I know that Peloton bikes are also highly coveted these days, but I think that's another piece, as George alluded to on that survey that we should be sending out. That is something that I'd love to hear good feedback on from the members. What do they want to see? If it's an elliptical machine going back in there, then great. If it's something else that's, I know someone else mentioned a universal gym, and what does it look like? What is the right piece of equipment to help meet the needs of our public that are using that facility? And I don't have that answer. I would look to the public for that answer.
Yeah, that's great, Brian. Thank you. And, I think that we're all interested in kind of increasing the value of our, joint asset here. So, talking with Miles about just the space in there and how things are utilized, I think there's a lot of opportunity in the gym to move things around. The trainers that are there a lot have really good ideas. And one thing that struck me when this gym was built was it was world class, but what that can mean and what it has meant in our town surveys is that the general public will walk in there and not have the faintest clue on how to use any of that equipment other than a treadmill or an elliptical. So I think that there's opportunity moving forward for all of us to, kind of set some goals of what we want this to look like. I think there's equipment in there that neither, user group of this gym uses. And Miles identified some of those for me. And so I think there's some opportunities there. He mentioned the forced treadmills, which I've seen Michaela on it, and it is really incredible to watch, but she's the only one I've ever seen on it. There's opportunity there.
Thank you, Terry. Yeah, I will. I'll also circle back with Miles and see what other input he has. Again, the staff that's down there, along with Chris Bowers, really has the finger on the pulse.
And also for the public on the video conference, the proceeds from selling the ellipticals were $2,850. That's in the MFC account. So if we sell other equipment, then you have those funds to purchase other equipment that should be so determined. Also, I want to point out that the SSCV purchased last year in 2019 to set up the cycling studio. It was initially $2,950, but with the flooring and the iPads associated, that total was $8,700, which became the asset. That expenditure became the asset of MFC. So that was perceived or promoted by JC and Miles to be something that would have interests with the public and to have classes associated too. So that was set up last year. But if we sell other equipment, we add to that pool, then we could go, that's in the account to be utilized too.
Yeah, thanks, Kirk. And, I remember when that purchase was going on I've done Miles' watt bike program every spring. And, those were purchased right before COVID hit. And so I don't think it was realized fully for the public. I don't think the public has realized that, but there is opportunity for those trainers to be utilized by the public in the form of cycling classes. And I'm confident we can figure that one out. Yeah, does anyone else have anything on the equipment? I just want to note, I think that, and just for moving forward, and I think this board understands it, but I'm going to say it just so the public understands that I know that we are all united on this, but moving forward as far as budgets for equipment, I think that can be discussed in the financials. And then any selling of equipment will be a board decision moving forward. And I think that nobody has to say anything. I think I'm confident everybody on this board knows that as well. So does anyone else have anything on equipment needs?
What's the comment, consideration of equipment in parking lot until November 1? What are we getting at on that point?
I apologize. I thought I had taken that off of the agenda since that was approved unanimously by this board when Brian sent out.
I might have printed out an old agenda. I apologize.
John is referring, I'm just going to say this because we have public, but to the an approval of the skate track and the trampoline in the back parking lot. And that was approved unanimously by this board. And that will be removed maybe the first week of November and for anybody that's asking about or curious about the public parking spots that will be lost by those, the school board has donated their spots on the, I guess it's the east end of their lot for staff. So that should open up those spots. Okay.
I had one question before you go forward. Back to the volunteer program, and I'm sorry for being behind here, but is there a number to call to create a list of volunteers that that are listening in or want to get on a list to help support that? Ms. Joel or Brian, that if someone wants to volunteer and they're listening today, or someone knows someone, where do they call to get on a list to reach out? Let's not miss an opportunity.
Sure. Thank you, George. So for volunteering, we have no program in place yet, to be clear. But if folks are wanting to get their name just down to be informed when something is in place, I strongly encourage them to do so. Chris isn't back yet, so I think what might be best is if they call myself at Town Hall or Brian at Ski and Snowboard Club Vail, depending on if they're SSCV and that's easier for them to call Brian, or if they're Town of Minturn, it's easier for them to call me. I think either one of us can take those calls and just get names on a list so that we can start organizing that. Brian, I'm sorry, I just totally volunteered you to take some phone calls.
Well, I'll even go further and provide the number. It's 790-5125. That's my office line. Thanks.
I'm 827-5645 and extension 8. Thanks, George.
That's okay. Anybody can go backwards if they want, if we didn't cover anything. Okay, so, and then we want to address the role of Howard Head sports medicine in the gym. And I would just, I've been having a little bit of a learning couple of weeks with the gym. And I think traditionally SSCV is powered, and maybe you guys can talk about this a little bit, but partnered with Stedman to have an intern physical therapist in there. They've been in there for a while. But I think we're curious about Howard Head specifically in this role as there was a Howard, and so the Howard Head employee is still in the gym. Is that person, I guess I will let you just run with it, John, or whoever wants to run with this.
Yeah, I will. So am I on? Yeah. So Howard Head's role is, there has been discussion between SSCB and Howard Head about involvement with programming, and nothing formalized, no agreement. There's been no compensation. Part of it is JC departed, Jimmy took over. Jimmy left because of a relationship. His girlfriend was living down in Denver. So there are two issues. I'm speaking for SSCV that we face. It's retention of our staff. And one thing was previously, when JC was running things, some of our conditioning coaches worked hours that they shouldn't have been working, both overseeing conditioning and administering the operation of MFC for the public. And there actually was kind of a little some of that was compensated through MFC, but we're trying to have our primary conditioning coaches not run the desk. Miles does have responsibilities with running MFC. Howard Head's involvement is exclusively, it's not running MFC, it's helping provide guidance on a volunteer basis for conditioning for SSCV. So they're not running MFC. In this case, the trainer from Howard Head helped us when Miles and Maddie were looking to sell the equipment. But that wasn't through Howard Head at all. And the relationship with Stedman is a key partnership. They are more heavily involved at the clubhouse where we have Stedman Philippon conditioning room, and we have an athletic trainer who they provide as part of that partnership. Some of the time, some afternoons when our athletes are present at MFC, they're there, but they don't get involved with public operation. So I think one thing for us to look at down the road, and I'm not proposing this, I'm not saying this is where we go, but if there was ever a third party, JC was looking into a partnership to bring a group in, and this would have to be a joint decision to run MFC and maybe that could work, but I know that never materialized. So, and that was never the case in this exploration, I would say, with Howard Head. So that hasn't moved forward, and that would have to be, obviously that would be a joint decision. There might be efficiencies, and with SSCV looking for those relationships with Stedman or say Howard Head, there are efficiencies there. So Stedman, that doesn't really relate to MFC, but they have the ability to bring in very qualified people, as does Howard Head with conditioning. So that's the extent of our relationship right now. And I looked into it, Brian looked into it, there's been no compensation to this point, and there was no formalized agreement to date. That's
Okay.
where we stand.
Thanks, Kirk. Yeah, I'm just curious if what you're talking about in the future with a partnership with Howard Head would be much the same as Access was, where they were servicing members of general public and student athletes out of the gym, or a different kind of partnership. They had an office there in that back room.
I don't believe so, because they have offices elsewhere, but I haven't really been involved in the development of this relationship. I know they stepped forward and helped us in a time of need when Jimmy departed, and we're SSCV is very appreciative for that. But beyond that, this agreement, we'll let you know if we proceed with the agreement and what those details are, but it hasn't moved forward right now.
Okay. Does anyone, George, Michelle, anyone else have questions? Okay, that covers it. And then, obviously any third party agreement will just, obviously there's a lot of communication to be had
Right.
with that. Which, brings us to the good stuff, and it's 10 after 4. The review of the bylaws, an opportunity to recommend changes for future consideration. Does anyone want to start with this? Michelle?
I am, I'm thinking that this is something that's going to come up down the road. I don't know if we're ready today for a full conversation, given that I think, Brian and I will start looking into the volunteer program. How does that work with our current bylaws? Do adjustments need to be made? Other than, a couple of things that John Keane hit on with some scheduling and timing of our meetings to meet with the fiscal years. I think that other adjustments to the bylaws might come in time as we all dive a little deeper and get a better understanding. Like Terry, you were in the gym, these last few weeks, and I think learned so much. And I think, I need to get in there and start educating myself more as well. Once we get through some of that, I think we'll have a better idea of what bylaws we might need to adjust to better set us up for success. I don't have any recommended changes today. I'm not prepared to offer any.
Yeah, I would offer up, I basically concur with Michelle, and I would add to that I think we could just agree as a board to sort of tighten up how we follow the bylaws, which I know has been sort of a cry of whatever for the last year. But there's a number of kind of important things, not just in how we make decisions, but there should be a budget that's discussed and approved, and so forth. And there's, if we could just initially focus on, let's try to do a better job, all of us, because it's all of us. It's not one party or the other. Just embrace the bylaws and try to adhere to them more rigorously.
George, your hand is up.
I agree with everything that's been said, and I think that in terms of this, and I really appreciate Kirk's view of and yours as well, that it's all of us together as a unit. That being said, each one of us should take a look at who we consider to be our user group and make sure that any changes in the bylaws protect those. And for that, and to be a little more specific, I would see the Minturn public and the Minturn volunteer program, and probably the Minturn elected officials as a user group, as well as on the other side, or I'm not trying to make sides here, the athletes and their families and the trainers are all different people that are using the facilities, so that whatever bylaw changes we make do not exclude any of the people that can benefit from using this, including this group right here on the screen.
Yeah.
Just to give everybody the heads up on some things that I've been doing as board secretary. When we have had the online votes, I do physically print out all 6 yes votes, staple them together. They go in the Minturn Fitness Center board binder with my signature indicating that all 6 have approved yes for a unanimous vote. And the next thing that I'll be working on, which John Keane hit on, I think in an email, and it's also in the bylaws, that we formalize everybody's board positions along with terms on the board. So that's the next step.
Thanks, Michelle and George. I wanted to maybe pop this up on all of you, and George and Michelle have heard me say this before, but one thing I want this board to consider, and this is this idea stems from the fact that traditionally we've had on the Minturn end of things, we've had a board, and I'll excuse George here because he did break his hip, but that didn't use the gym. And Michelle did, but and then on the SSCV side, I think you guys are, I don't think either any of you have a membership at the gym either. And so just my idea is that I hope you'll consider is that I would be interested in expanding this board to include users of the gym, and specifically what I have in mind, and I'll just throw it out there for you, and we don't necessarily have to vote on this today, but what I'm thinking is two members of the general public that are gym users, and equally one is a Minturn resident and one is an SSCV parent. And the reason I would be interested in that is just to have some more voices in the room that actually see what goes on there, advocates for the general public and advocates for the SSCV students and parent group. I'm not sure the numbers. Brian may have more numbers of how many SSCV parents use the gym and how many members of the Minturn public use the gym. But I just thought that might make us stronger as a board, having those two extra voices in the room. So I would just entertain any thoughts on the subject.
So Terry, just from Minturn side of things, I believe the way we're set up right now is if this board were to determine an expansion from 6 to 8, I believe it's still the Minturn Town Council that would appoint the 4th person. I'd need to look to confirm that, but I believe it's the council for Minturn side.
And likewise, I would assume that SSCV would appoint their citizen representative to the board as well. I would just ask that it would be, if this board is amenable to it, I would just ask that it would be that they are an active member of the gym.
I don't have any particular objection. I think it's an interesting idea. I think we should all think about it and revisit the next time we meet. And just as a footnote, I have 4 kids and they've all spent a lot of hours at the MFC. So I feel like I'm somewhat representing the interests of athletes, if you will. But that's not to counter your point. It's just I wanted to clarify how I'm being described.
I certainly didn't mean anything.
No, I know, but you raise a good point. I think I'd like to give it more thought. I think it's worthy of consideration.
All right, anyone else have any thoughts on review of bylaws and opportunity to recommend changes?
Nothing other than Brian and I might be coming back to y'all with some things in the future.
Okay. And now we're on to review MFC financials.
Okay, so you have all received those. I have some good news that John, so you can see that there's a projected loss of 113,000. Tiffany communicated with John and I that there was a miscalculation, and this is ever evolving because what are the trainer wages going to be? So the trainer wages, instead of being 29,714, now should be 16,032. And admin wages and other wages, instead of 30,893, 31,151. So that brings payroll to 52,076 versus the 65,500. And so I would say that the obviously there's a cost to SSCV, and there should be for MFC. There's not a goal to bring this down to zero, but SSCV cannot afford to handle an operating loss of $99,000. And we did step in to resolve this issue with the town and said that we would staff. So the two areas that is that admin, other wages, 31,151, which really is 100% toward public operation. And the exceptional cost of cleaning right now, which is associated to COVID, and generally that's been dramatically less. So 33,600 right now is cleaning. It's $1,050 weekly to have the facility cleaned. I think, Brian, that's 7 days a week, correct?
Correct. Yeah. One thing I would say about the labor numbers, and thank you for, adjusting that. But that's now as we are currently operating. So by adding additional staffing and additional time slots earlier in the morning and at other times, that could see those numbers increase.
The trainer wages, actually, that's a positive. So that you pay the people who subcontract to do the training, and that's, as you can see in the budget, that's a positive revenue. So there's a significant expense, but there's a positive revenue. So basically it's whatever we can do to look at the admin and other wages. And, Town of Minturn did step up to help reduce the operating expenses somewhat, to look at how we can possibly lower those expenses. And just so you know, if you look at the SSCV cash contributions since the beginning of this operation, I think it's, I'm not open, I don't have that open right now, but I think it's 287,000 cash contribution from SSCV. So I know that, I think Michelle might have been, I saw you were one of the original signees, but the expectation, and maybe those were driven by SSCV, was that there was going to be a positive revenue line, and that hasn't been the case. And so that's where I was coming from when I started looking at fees. And I don't think that we just look at what our current losses are and then we increase fees to cover those losses and say we have a credit in there for what the value of to SSCV for the operations are. I don't think that's going to cut it. I do think there is an opportunity, and this might work into George's survey, what would be fair fees? What would be attractive to possibly double the use by the town of Minturn citizens? So our opportunities really are end of COVID will lower the cleaning fees. I do have hopes that Michelle can, if we have appropriate fees, that the public sees are reasonable so that they have more buy-in to the MFC, and it's more of a team working together, that there'll be more volunteerism, and that could lower that operating expense for staff. Those are the main.
I'm sorry, I interrupted, Kirk, but I'm in agreement that trainers shouldn't be working the front desk, that's not what they signed up for, and it's certainly not the dollar point that you want to have for front desk staff. And I think that there's a lot of these costs that we can start diving into and taking a look at. One thing I do want to ask about, because it is such an exceptionally high expense with being $1,050 a week. Brian, what are the cleaners? I mean, if it's for COVID, what are the cleaners cleaning? Like, is it the bathrooms? Is it every touch point? Like, certainly, I don't think they're cleaning the gym equipments, but I don't know. Do you know what the contract has them cleaning every night?
Yeah, it has them cleaning the the bathroom facilities, the floor, so mopping the whole entire floor, all the touch points and surfaces like countertops. They have not been diving into the equipment as you noted. That is still an expectation of the users and the front desk staff as well. That's part of their expectation as well, to monitor what pieces of equipment are being used and then wipe them down after that session, which is why they have kind of half an hour buffers on either side of those open gym times to allow for both setup and preparation and then cleaning on the back end. I do think there is an opportunity, and I know that the town has helped with certain things out there, whether it's mowing or potentially irrigation. I'm not sure what all the town has helped with, but is cleaning something that we could reduce costs? Obviously it wouldn't be free, but are there economies of scale with any contracts that the town of Minturn has that we could add some hours onto their that contract and get a lower cost for cleaning over at the MFC?
It's certainly something that we can look into in regards to economies of scale. I mean, as an example, we get town hall cleaned once a week. It's not every night, and it doesn't need to be cleaned every night. I'm just going to say it. The nights that I volunteered out there were only 2. It was really great to be out there, but I think I had, we didn't have any the night that we were there, did we, Brian? I don't think we did. But then I had a couple other nights where I think there were 2 people each night, and the cleaning people came in, and I was kind of wondering, well, are they coming in just to clean for these 2 folks that came in because everything else was already clean? Are they cleaning for all of the student athletes as well? I know that the cleaning was added when the public came back, and I'm really having a hard time grasping the need. I understand COVID, I understand it, but I also want to stay realistic. And so no one used the women's restroom the night that I was there. I think I had several guys come in, or 2 guys come in and work out. But the cleaning crew still came. So I assumed it was also for student athletes, but wasn't really sure. This is just such a large number in relation to most of the other numbers under these operating expenses that I'm really needing to justify every night.
I just want to also point out one thing. The $33,000, that's not an annualized number. I'm assuming, because $1,000 times 52 weeks is $52,000. So should the need for whatever we decide upon continue, and we want it clean every night, that's not $33,000, that's $52,000, increasing the annualized loss. But that's, to answer your question, I'll let Brian comment.
Thanks, John.
Yeah, I think that may have been through the end of the fiscal year, John. I'm not sure.
Yeah, it's probably September through April, something like that.
But with regard to the cleaning, so yes, the cleaning is in place to really safeguard the public. We felt that was a primary concern when we opened back up to the public. We've been really leaning on the coaching staff, the human performance staff, working with the SFCB athletes to clean when they're there. But we really wanted to make sure the public were safe and take that extra measure to ensure that. I didn't want anything potentially coming back saying that we were cutting corners, that we weren't doing our due diligence there. As we open back up to the public, we want to do it in the safest manner possible. If this board agrees on appropriately reducing that cleaning schedule, and we obviously could save some costs there, I would
What do
be,
you think, Brian? I mean, you're probably the closest to the ground on
well,
what
I mean,
any needs are.
you know, candidly, the use has not necessarily warranted that level of cleaning. I was hoping that we would have, you know, a lot more public interests in there. And I think we will in the coming weeks and definitely coming months. So it might be overkill right now, but it might also be necessary as we get further down the road here. You know, I do believe most gyms that are open to the public are doing a daily cleaning. I could reach out. I know a few operators down Valley that I could see what their cleaning regimens are, at least to have a basis of comparison.
Okay. Thank you.
I will just add, not having Chris in there and having been in there in the past couple weeks, Chris really kept a tight ship, I think, with that, keeping the gym clean, and specifically, you know, racks and, you know, the cycles and all of that, you know, and right now with the garage bay doors open, which is good for keeping the ventilation in there for COVID, it gets pretty dirty in there. I mean, so the dumbbell racks are pretty filthy. And so if there can be, you know, maybe athletes wiping down, you know, those after use, or, you know, those are some of the things that have kind of gone by the wayside, I think. And like I said, with the garage doors open, which is a good thing, it gets pretty dirty in there. So I think, you know, just having, you know, requiring the athletes to wipe down after they use everything. And I think you're already doing that, but that would help.
We mean all users by that, right? All athletes, who's ever
All
used.
athletes. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. But Brian, I like the idea of you reaching out to other gym operators to get a feel for what practices they're following for cleaning, you know, with an eye towards whether there's opportunity to decrease the cleaning intensity that we're using right now.
Yeah, because previously our staff was cleaning for our use, right? So this was an additional cost. Like George, you brought up the concern about how we were gonna do the cleaning relative to COVID. So this was an additional cost that was added because of COVID concerns for the public, right, Brian?
That is correct, yes.
Yeah.
We would not have been as aggressive if the current environment was different.
And looking at our fluid business model, is there any support out there to cover that cleaning cost? Just a question. A lot of other supports come due to COVID. There might be something there.
Good point, George. Thank you for bringing that up.
So in looking at the memberships and training account for a substantial part of the MFC revenue, I think 68,961. Of those memberships, monthly memberships, those are just general public, correct? So this doesn't show any athlete student fees at all, right? That's not how the model was done. And I mentioned last meeting I would be interested in that because, you know, SSCV shows covering a loss of over 100,000. Would some of that be attributed to student athlete memberships for the gym? And I don't have numbers, but I'm guessing roughly there's 200 student athletes all told with cycling and hockey and skiers and snowboarders. You know, would some of that, or is there a way can we look at moving forward, having just showing those numbers equally so that, you know, I think and what I'm getting at is, I think in the way the bylaws were written, Minturn just had to put in the initial investment, and then we're done. And I think that I certainly don't think that's a good way to move into the future. I think that it puts us all in a bad position of SSCV going, well, we're covering all the operating costs, and then Minturn, sitting there going, well, we're not on the hook to do anything. And then it causes issues. I think it has caused issues with the gym. So is there a way that we can relook at the way that you charge your student athletes to reflect onto this overall operating income, so that, because I know obviously they're paying coaches fees, but none of that is looking or comes over to this bottom line.
Well, I think all your points are totally accurate, and we would tend to agree with all those. We definitely will look at that for the next meeting. I think the opinion previously was like that 267,000. It also said that when there's a profit, that would go to offset some of that debt, which we don't forecast that happening anytime soon. So I think that's a fair point. I think it starts with coming up with what are the fair fees, and that number is actually 176. So it's athletes who are, I think, 14 and older full-time, and that's 176 athletes. And just to, on the fees, I think a 6-month membership right now is $322. So I looked at Gibson for comparison, because Gibson, I don't think Minturn and Gibson should have Vail-centric fees. They're not as convenient to get to. And in Gibson, you have the track, you have the pool, you have the climbing wall. So I don't think we should be priced above Gibson. I think we should have a youth fee, which they have. But if we revise those fees, I think then you come up with what is the fair, costs to SSCV for operations. And our position is certainly that this total deficit, the town can't whittle that down. I think it's us working together on all these pieces, the volunteerism to reduce costs, reduce the cleaning, look at what that fair value is for SSCV, and just factor that in as an actual, on paper, that's revenue, right? And that I want to make clear to any of our members that are listening, we wouldn't charge our membership more. We would, that should be considered part of what they pay for their membership for SSCV. So I think we can look at that. And I'd like to work, I don't know, I think we should have a subgroup that maybe looks at fees for the next meeting, and we'll definitely look at coming up with that answer, Terry.
Yeah, that's great. And definitely, I think it's, like you said, it wouldn't be necessarily that SSCV would have to charge their members more, just showing what percentage of what they pay or what number on the paper goes to MFC, so that Minturn doesn't look like a bunch of freeloaders. But I think that's important. I think that, and I like your idea of a subgroup. And I would certainly be willing to be on that, to look at budgeting. And I think that's a good idea, because, a lot of things can fall under that subgroup roles, is figuring out maintenance, for example. The gym is, I think it's 6 years old, maybe a little older, but stuff is falling apart. There's a wear and tear, and I think that we need to kind of instead of being reacting to every breakdown, I think we need to come up with a good budget for that. Maybe work with the ongoing staff. I know that, again, Miles does all the maintenance. But I think it would be smart of us to kind of take the reins on this proactively from here forward.
I apologize that I don't have time to be on the subcommittee other than the volunteer subcommittee. But I'm wondering if it's a value to try to look at those fees and see if recommendations can be made for first of the year, since that's a great marketing time for our gyms. I don't know if that's pushing things too quickly, but
No, I think that I would think even sooner than that's possible, but
okay.
yeah. Kirk, what do you think? I mean,
I think we should. I think maybe Terry and I can start working together on it.
yeah,
And then we can bring Brian in or Michelle for operations as needed for
Yeah.
that information.
yeah.
That's great. That's great, Kirk. And maybe part of that is if, coming up with these numbers, we figure out how to market to
Yeah.
fill in those gaps.
Agreed.
Great. Okay. So to
Well,
kind of,
as you deadbeat in the party here, I would like to volunteer to put together a trial survey format,
that'd be great.
list items that I'll generate the first one that I think need to be asked about. And then the other part would be, what questions are we trying to answer?
Yeah.
It's two different things, and one is like equipment, and then what's
Hours.
what's wrong with it, or hours. But
Yeah.
but you can, it's two different things. What are you looking at, and what question are you trying to answer about it? And I put together an outline, and then we'll send it out, and everybody take a look and add to it, and
It's great.
we polish it up.
I think it'd be really very helpful.
George, are you thinking 2 formats for that? Are you thinking the in-person questions when you're capturing folks at the gym physically, and then also a Survey Monkey style where we can email it out to both of our groups?
I was thinking of a handwritten paper where they could go through and check the box and have a line on the bottom to answer it. But certainly both formats could be incorporated pretty easily. The
Yeah.
people that are got their feet on the ground and are done, and it takes them a minute to fill this out and drop it in, are the right now, this is what
Right.
happened to me.
Mhm.
Really relevant data to me.
Yeah, the Survey Monkey.
Also a question, if fees, something to the effect of fees were reasonably set relative to other training centers in the Vail Valley, attractive, would you tend to enroll or purchase membership?
Sure, and we'd like to know if fees were paid on a by the time basis or a monthly basis, and then fees for specific programs it could be explored pretty hard, I think, pretty deeply.
Well, I would encourage both the on-site survey capture as well as an online. On-site's capturing those who are coming today. The online would likely be capturing those who are our prospects.
For sure,
So
I agree.
both sides are important.
I wonder if the MindBody app or computer software has a survey to blast to its users. That might be worth a question. I don't want to put more work on anybody's plate, but I wonder if that has that capability.
Sure, and if it doesn't, we could easily, just send out a link to a Survey Monkey or something else of that nature.
I'd like to come back on a few things that we hit on, but I'm not sure what closure we reached. As it relates to the cleaning services, I know on one hand, Brian's going to reach out and try to benchmark what other health clubs are doing as it relates to cleaning. On the other side, can Minturn explore whether there are cleaning services that they use as a town that we could piggyback on that may be more cost effective than the one we're paying?
And I can take a look at that. I know that the town of Minturn pays $130 a week right now for our cleaning.
We'll take that one.
So I'll talk with Jay, who handles that account, and
Yeah.
we'll see what he has to say.
That'd be great. And one of the other big line items here is utilities. And I'm getting into territory I'm not as confident about, but I do know that one of the big items here is water. And does Minturn have any influence over what we're charged? Or is that just something that you just gotta take?
And isn't part of that the tap fee? In
Yes.
for some reason, when the building facility was constructed, that wasn't incorporated in the costs. And so I think that phases out in 2023. I'm talking off the top of my head. I think it's between $4,500 and $5,000 annually, I think.
So the tap fee that you're thinking of was the sewer tap. I believe that Minturn waived the water tap fee. I want to say that was going to be about $45,000 for the water tap, and I believe Minturn waived that. And for full transparency, it is Minturn's water utility. Sewer is not within our purview. That's Eagle River Water and Sanitation District, and that's entirely their system to run. Minturn is going through $17 million worth of water infrastructure improvements right now. So all of the water user fees have gone up for all of our residents and businesses in town. That being said, folks have a lower base rate so that they only pay for what they use, as opposed to paying for something that you might not use. We did go through this last spring, and Public Works did find some leaks in the irrigation system out at the fitness center, and got those corrected. It would be I think it would be a decision above me if council were to decide not to charge water fees, which, just given the pressure that Minturn is under to get us to a better water system, I'd have a hard time with that one, specifically given how much time and effort we've spent getting our water system back in play.
I certainly respect that and understand that viewpoint. I think if we could move to a usage, charge for use, as you referenced, that some of the residents have been moved to, I think that would mitigate some of those costs. The way I've seen the water charges, it's a monthly fixed base price right now. And that covers a lot of gallons that really we don't even get close to until irrigation in the summer. So if we could flip that to go to a usage based,
which it did, yes, it went to a usage base on January 1. Before, it was just as you were saying, there was a base that included 6,000 gallons per tap, and the fitness center has multiple taps. So I think the fitness center was getting something like 30,000 gallons a month, within this cost that you were being charged. Now it's just the base, and you don't pay anything extra unless you use it. And we have new meters that we're installing throughout town with our meter replacement program, and those count to the gallon. So it's not round, it's not 1,000, it's to the gallon.
have those been replaced out at the MFC? Do we know?
I don't believe the MFC has been replaced yet. We've been replacing the ones that have been not working in properties, and the ones that are getting bad reads. So we're going through those first, but we plan to replace the entire town. And those are not at the cost of the MFC. The town of Minturn covers that cost.
So Michelle, was part of that cost initially looking at the need for the sprinkler system? Was that part of it? But it's not, something that's utilized, right? Was that part of that calculation?
No, calculations for TAP are based on square footage. for
Oh.
commercial. I would say that the fitness center has an opportunity, I think, to use a lot less irrigation water. I don't think it needs as much as, I mean, the grass is green. It's not a ton of grass out there to begin with. I think that there's ways to bring that down even further. So we can keep those discussions ongoing.
Great.
Yeah, and the council reviews water every year. So, if there's feedback always in how the council's, how we figure out rates, always let us know. We don't have, you have an opportunity to have a voice be heard because we don't have just a crazy amount of businesses in town. So, we have other businesses talking to us as well about questions. So, and when do we review that, Michelle?
That'll be when the fee schedule comes before council, which should be beginning of November.
So it's coming up.
It's coming up.
Well, I guess from my perspective, I would defer to you guys as to best tactics on how to manage this. If there's an opportunity for this line item to be lowered through whatever means, it sounds like you're much closer to how decisions are made. And so your advice would be helpful in that.
I can say that the council approved the waiving of water fees for 3 months back in May, June, and July of this year for COVID. So there should be 3 months that the fitness center did not have a water bill.
Okay.
Okay. So unless anybody has anything else on this agenda, we can talk about future meetings and agenda discussion topics. I think, again, we have 3 subcommittees working here, a volunteer subcommittee, a survey subcommittee of George, and a budget subcommittee of Terry and Kirk. And volunteer would be Brian and Michelle. So do we want to talk about sticking with the 4 meetings annually for 2020 MFC board meetings? And then just so everybody understands, we can always have discussion topics be approved via email, which is okay to do in our bylaws.
I think 4 feels right. We need to schedule more. We can always do that. And that'd be I would support that.
Can I just add, I haven't looked at the calendar. Is this our last board meeting for 2020? In which case it's great to wrap up anything for 2020. But I would just ask, if it is our last board meeting for 2020, if we can get the 4 board meetings scheduled for 2021.
Yeah.
And if that's something we need to do via email, that's great too. I would just love to get those on the calendar.
Right. Well, I don't think we formally agreed, but we conceptually agreed to this annual meeting being moved to April. If we need to formally approve that, we should do so. The idea of early April is that the fiscal year ends end of April, and so to approve a budget, we want to approve a budget before the year starts, and this would give us time to make any final modifications before the end of the fiscal year. So I would suggest sort of working off of that. And so if it's April, then maybe there's one in January and, July and October, but that'd be my high level suggestion.
January, April, July, and October.
Yeah, like every 3 months.
Perfect.
So moved.
Okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 And do we want to get more specific on the exact dates? Or do you want to circle back on that and, agree on that by email?
Yeah, how about if I send out a doodle poll for everybody?
Yeah.
To check availabilities.
Yeah.
And then I think if we don't do it today, we will want to have on the agenda for our January meeting to formally adjust the fiscal year, because that is in the bylaws. And I think there's support here to adjust the fiscal year to
Can we
April.
do that right now?
Yeah, let's do it now.
Oh yeah, George is with us. Yeah, let's do it
now.
now.
I don't buy green bananas. Come on.
I make a motion to amend the Minturn Fitness Center fiscal year to coincide with Ski and Snowboard Club Vail, so that it is aligned with the end of April.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
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 And so do you want to do the corollary of changing the annual meeting to early April? The bylaws right now talk about early June, although it says you can schedule it another time that you'd like, but should we just formalize that?
I think so. Make a motion for the annual meeting of the Minturn Fitness Center to take place in April.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I just, rather than pushing back some of the answers to the questions of hours of programming, budget talks that will be ongoing for future review of the financials, and then the survey, we can all communicate by email. I don't want us to lose the momentum that we have by not having another meeting by the end of this year. So I'm hopeful we can, does everybody think we can kind of continue to work on those with some, obviously hours of programming, Brian, those will change, those will be ongoing, I guess, right now because of COVID. And we all agree that'll be, we're going to have to just kind of roll with the COVID guidelines right now and what happens. But as far as adding classes, that'll have to do with volunteers, and adding open gym time will have to do with volunteer staffing with volunteers. So would we expect volunteers to be online before the January meeting?
I'm hopeful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, Terry, I think we should, we should schedule a board meeting between, this fall sometime, once we have sort of the information together on what the winter programming will be, what's proposed to be, so that the board can discuss it and approve it.
Okay.
Be a short call. But I mean, in this, the bylaws ask that the board approve of programming, and since that hasn't been clarified yet, the winter programming, let's get it together and get it hashed out, and then have a board call. Or we could do it by email, but and so your guys' call. I can go either way, but I would
I think the
suggest
board
that
call is great.
we should anticipate another. We need to approve that, and let's do it. Let's do it in a formal way.
So Brian, do you have a good idea of when, I can certainly do that as well. The Zoom format makes meetings a lot easier for me. And do you have a time or date that would work, Brian?
I think off the top of my head, I think like we were talking about earlier in the call, 2 to 3 weeks to kind of iron that out with all the involved parties and schedules.
Brian, would it? I don't think we want to put you in a corner and pick a date that's not going to work. But would it make sense for you to get back to the board next week after you've had some conversations to recommend when would be a good time for a board meeting to discuss and approve of winter programming?
Yeah, and initially the first thought that came to my mind was third week of October.
Yeah.
Somewhere around there, so we could launch soon after that. Maybe it's middle of October, but yeah, let me do a little work on that over the next couple of days, and then I can reach out via email with an update next week, and we can kind of focus that timeline a little closer on a specific day or date.
Thank you.
Thanks, that's great. Okay. All meetings will be via Zoom until further notice. I don't think this board has the capacity to do in-person meetings yet. So if there's nothing else, we can, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
A second.
All in favor?
Hi,
Aye.
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 Thank you, everybody.
Thank you,
so
everybody.
much.
Thank you.
thanks.